Peace and Pan-Africanism.
Peace and Pan-Africanism.
Yay.
Welcome.
Boys, how's everybody doing?
All right.
All right. It's an honor to be in Norwood for the first time. I guess last time we was in Rockton. So I guess I'm just doing a tour of all the white suburbs of Massachusetts. But anyway, it's an honor to be here. I don't want to waste any time, so I want to get right into the conversation. And we're here to talk about our children. So I want to talk about some things that I think all of you need to consider when we're dealing with making sure our children are getting what they are entitled to and what they deserve in the school system here in Massachusetts. I want to put the conversation in a little bit of context. So I want to go back to 1968, Dr. King's assassination, because to be honest, the new black America that we're living in now, or have lived in over these past 55 years, it began with the assassination of Dr. King, who was the last leader we had to give us some sort of a serious struggle. Although we've had people claim to be leaders since then, they did more talking than acting. And that's where we've been for the past 55 years. So after Dr. King's murder, the US government says we have to make sure black people can never rise again. And the first thing they did was they came into the inner cities and they eliminated all of the economic opportunities. They turned the black community into a job desert, they turned it into a skills desert, and they turned it into a mass incarceration haven. Before 1970, you could get a decent job right in the middle of Boston, right in the middle of Philly, right in the middle of Chicago, Detroit, Atlanta. It didn't matter. The government said, if we want to turn black people into a permanent underclass, we have to strip them of the ability to earn a living legally. And that's exactly what they did. They went into the high schools and took out all the building trade programs, carpentry, plumbing, HVAC, welding, roofing, auto mechanic. Up until 1970, you didn't have to go to college to live a decent life. You simply learned a skill in high school that afforded you the opportunity to pay your bills. So in the 70s, they took out all the skill paying programs in the high schools, and then they took the factories out the inner cities as well. And many of those very same factories that once employed our grandparents and great-grandparents, they have been turned into prisons. Talk about 360 degrees of change. So after they did that, they finished waging war on the original Black Panther Party. The revolutionary era of the Black Panther Party ends in the early 70s. The Black Liberation Army picks up from then, but they've already taken care of Dr. King in 68. They assassinated Fred Hampton in 69. They assassinated George Jackson in 1971. And then by 1981, crack came. So between 71 and 81, they really focused on what can we do to turn black children into a permanent underclass. They needed a solution. Now in the mid-70s, as you know, right here in Boston, Massachusetts, you guys probably had one of the most aggressive anti-school desegregation plans where Irish parents burned buses, threw rocks, beat up black children, called them the N-word, so forth and so on. So the government said, we gotta do something to get these white racist school districts to accept black children. And they came up with a mega bomb called special education. And so special education was the weapon that the power structure would use to, number one, force white school districts to accept black children. Well, how did they do that? They did it because special education comes with a subsidy. It's subsidized education. So whenever you put a kid in special ed, the school gets paid. So the incentive in Boston public schools at that time, or Philadelphia public schools at that time, or New York City public schools at that time, we know you don't want these black children, but look at all the extra thousands of dollars you will get by letting them in. And we're giving you the prerogative that after you let them into your predominantly white school, you can resegregate them behind closed doors by simply giving them an IEP and put them in a class from the educationally mentally retarded, the learning disabled, the emotionally disturbed, so forth and so on. So special education was the perfect weapon because it gave white schools extra money. It gave black parents the illusion of inclusion. And although your child was inside of a white school physically, they were still segregated once they got into the schoolhouse. And it became a waiting room where you would send black children, boys in particular, where you would hang around, being miseducated, until you finally realized it was a waste of time and you either dropped out or you went to jail. So special education is the school to prison pipeline. And then we also got to keep in mind that when we go back to 1964, the year before they killed Malcolm X, President Lyndon Baines Johnson declared a war on poverty, okay? And then the very month after they killed Malcolm X, he declared a war on crime, okay? And then Richard Nixon declared a war on drugs in 1971, and Ronald Reagan declared a second war on drugs, 1982. Now, putting this in perspective, what am I trying to say? The war on drugs and the war on crime was the federal government's intentional transitioning away from fighting for black people to get equality and justice towards criminalizing black people so the government wouldn't have to do anything for them except lock them up. You see the difference there? Up until 1970, black people are the victims. After 1970, black people became the perpetrators. And then, okay, after Ronald Reagan declared a second war on drugs in 1982, the American government would give its greatest support around 1985, 1986, with the rise of gangster rap, which is exactly what they needed at the time that they needed. So now you got young black inner city males making music where they are glorifying the very accusations that the government is using to turn black people into a criminal underclass. Just in time for 1994's Bill Clinton crime bill, which locked up more black people in American history than any president ever after the Civil War. So that's where we are now. Everything they're doing, they've been up to it. Our problems were not created by us, but they are made worse by us because we do nothing about them. I want to be very clear about that. There's not a problem you got that you started. You didn't start mass incarceration. You didn't start the school miseducation. You didn't start gentrification. You didn't start economic devastation. Every problem in our community was created by the white power structure, but is made worse because of black apathy, black indifference, black selfishness, and black self-hatred. So now let's get into the school to prison pipeline. Let's get into the specifics of the situation. Number one, big mistake that black parents are making. You're getting children evaluated too early. Biggest problem of 2023, too young to be tested. 3 years old looking for autism. Autism is real, but you can't prove it at 3. How do you know the 3-year-old doesn't have a selective mutism issue, or a social anxiety issue, or a hearing issue, or a deaf issue, or an emotional trauma issue? How do you know? You don't know at 3. Y'all need to slow down and stop getting your children tested so early. Remember, special ed is a weapon. That means it hurts your child more than it can help your child. And as someone who's been testing children for 25 years, I'm a school psychologist. I do the evaluation, the IQ testing, the reading, the writing, the math, the emotional assessments, the adaptive behavior, the visual motor screenings. I do the testing. And for the life of me, I'm still trying to find out what you parents find to be so special about special education. Well, Johnny can't read, Dr. Umar. He's in the 2nd grade. He's still struggling. You know why? Because he don't practice enough. You don't work with him enough. And he don't spend enough time on task. We've gotten so lazy that the minute our children struggle, you win an IEP, incarceration education preparation program. That's all special ed is. Getting them ready for jail. How can a child going slower ever catch up to the other children? Special ed is stepping on the gas and slowing the instruction all the way down to a point where the IEP team feels is commensurate for your child. They never catch up. They're not supposed to catch up because special ed is designed to feed the prisons. It's not designed to help your child, but it feeds off the laziness and the apathy of black parents who think putting a label on your child is a solution. The label is not a solution. When your child get a label, some of y'all act like y'all hit the lottery. Okay? Stop it. He's not reading disabled. He's lazy disabled. And so are you. What are y'all doing right now? Shopping. Buying video games for kids who can't read on grade level. You part of the school to prison pipeline. You out buying tablets and cell phones for kids who can't count on their grade level. You part of the school to prison pipeline. If he can't read before the video game system, you could be for certain he won't be reading after he starts playing with it. I want y'all to look at your Christmas gifts because I want you to know you're investing in your son's future mass incarceration. You're buying things that takes him away from academics. And you know what's sad? Very few books are under the Christmas tree. Very few books. very few ink pens, pencils, writing tablets. The stuff that our children need to get ahead, we don't invest in that. And then we talk about how bad the schools are. They are bad, but our houses aren't much better. Where's the thesaurus? Do you have one? That should have been the first thing for Christmas. Where's the dictionary with at least 1,000 pages in it? Do you have one? That should have been the second thing for Christmas. Where's the encyclopedia? Do you have one? That should have been the third one for Christmas. Because you know if your boys can't read by the time they finish the 4th grade, there's a very strong likelihood they'll be spending some of their adulthood in prison. And that is so predictive that governments all across the 50 states have been using reading skill levels of black boys in elementary school to predict how many prisons and prison beds they'll need over the next decade. See, we were brought to America to be the opportunity financially for white folks. And you know what's sad? We are still the opportunity for white folks financially. Once they hustled you on an auction block, now they hustle you on a special ed auction block, the NBA auction block, the NFL auction block, the gangster rap auction block. And what do all of our boys want to be? Athletes and entertainers. They don't want to own nothing. 2 weeks ago, I was at the Delaware Black Farmers Conference at HBCU, Delaware State University. You know what they said? They said that when you talk to young people about becoming farmers, almost none of them are interested in it. And I had to stand back and think about it because I've been speaking at career days for almost 30 years. And I don't ever recall hearing a black child say, what do you want to be when you grow up? A farmer. Less than 1% of all farmers in America are black. And many of them are aging. The black farmers are an aging population. And you know what one of the biggest issues are? They can't find young people who want to learn the skill of the trade. Which means black people are living in food deserts. And even if you're not living in a food desert, you're living in a town or an area where your food is provided by somebody who 9 times out of 10 hates your guts. I just read an article the other day that Bill Gates' food, because you know Bill Gates is now the #1 owner of arable land in the United States. Why does a tech giant get involved in agriculture? Because Bill Gates wants to poison the food and sell it to you as part of their depopulation control agenda. And speaking of the depopulation control agenda, the father of the depopulation control agenda, former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, just died yesterday. Thank God. This was the man who authored the NSSM 200, the National Security Study Memorandum 200 in December of 1974, saying the United States government needs to take intentional steps to reduce the world's population. From that came your AIDS. From that came your mass incarceration. From that came your LGBTQRSTUXYV. It all came from that. Anything we can do to cut the numbers of black people down, your COVID and everything else they're working on came out of that original 1974 document. He just died yesterday at the age of 100 years old. And you know what's interesting? A lot of these population control junkies and white supremacists, they fled Germany during the time of you know who. They fled persecution only to come to America and become the leading persecutors of black people. How you flee persecution in Germany and come to America and do all you can to eliminate Africans in the world, but you can't talk about that because you'll be considered anti this and anti that. The untouchables. Okay? Now, getting back to the school system. Y'all can leave the lights on. This is not a party. Turn the lights on. So, #1, stop getting the children evaluated too young. The only thing that I think is acceptable at a young age is a speech and language evaluation. If you think the child needs speech and language, go ahead and get a speech and language eval. That is a form of special ed. But unlike the other disabilities, it does not land your child in a classroom. If your child has a speech and language impairment, they simply get speech and language therapy from the therapist. It's a pull-out service. So I don't have no issues with speech and language, okay? But I do want you to know that a lot of the charter schools in your city are sabotaging, or should I say exploiting black learners in the name of speech by getting everybody evaluated for speech who don't even have a speech problem so they can get the extra money. Remember, every school in Massachusetts is looking for a way to increase their special ed numbers so they can increase their budget. It is your job as the parent to say, my son don't need no speech therapist. He's just fine. Well, we think, I don't care what you think. He don't need it and he's not going to get it. You have to start being more aggressive and you have to start being more